Now, what are the four critical facets of leadership transition? We have considered several aspects of leadership in founder-led, co-founder-led and family-led corporations. So, what are the four critical facets? The first requirement is, how do I keep up the growth momentum? That's the first requirement, obviously. Entrepreneurial firms have been what they are because of the growth momentum. So, how does one keep up the growth momentum? For that, business strategy and business model are vital for driving the growth path. The second is, how do I achieve scale and scope? Growth is achieved essentially by scale and scope, more capacity and better product market scope. So, how do I therefore reshape the organization? The third one is that, how do I deal with myself? When I enter an organization as a professional leader, particularly an organization which has been entrepreneurially driven, founder-led, let's say, until now, how do I capture the differences? How do I understand the differences, and how do I respect the differences? That's one of the important aspects, and to be able to do that, the leader should first understand himself or herself. Then once this is in place, this framework of growth methodology, the framework of organization building, the framework of understanding oneself is in place, one should know how to cope with the relationship issues that are bound to take place. And for that, rapport with the stakeholders is critical to ensure that there is a smooth and seamless transition for the company. And CEOs can be inducted at different stages of the company, as we discussed. Typically, a company will start as a startup company, will have growth in terms of three phases. One is early growth, where first green shoots of commercialization take place, then mid-level growth, and the third one is late growth. Then the company goes into maturity phase, and eventually growth plateaus. There could also be a situation where there could be decline, and there could also be an exit from the industry. So, keeping the two extreme aspects of decline and exit apart, founders need to examine at each stage whether their ability set, whether their competency set, whether their overall mindset is still the right fit for the stage of the company that the time tells. So, introspection, whether they are still of the right fit at each stage of the company, is vital to understand the need for CEO transition. Again, the nature of CEO selection and leadership transition depends on the evolutionary stage. You will require one type of CEO if the founder is willing to transit at an early growth stage, and you would require another type of CEO if the transition takes place when the firm has reached a level of maturity. And of course, if the firm is having exit issues, or if the firm is having decline issues, you require a different kind of executive, mostly a turnaround specialist, to be able to manage this. And at that point of time, possibly also the founders would no longer have the choice to determine whether there is a need for leadership succession. That could well be a mandatory requirement for the change. Now, we have talked about from a founder angle when he should decide, how he should decide, what he should do, and how this whole transition could be thought about and enabled. But let us also look at what are the CEO capabilities. When a CEO enters an entrepreneurial firm, he should have certain capabilities, and in any organization those capabilities are likely to be the same, whether you are in an entrepreneurial firm or you are in a professionally managed mainstream firm. The capabilities for the CEO are by and large the same. That said, there would be a much greater emphasis on the cultural aspects of the competencies besides the technical and business skills, which are anyway given. High level of business and technical competencies is required to pursue a growth plan and to execute a growth plan. That is granted. But what are the cultural capabilities which a CEO should have? First of all, the culture of governance. An external member comes into an entrepreneurial firm to shape that company into a well structured, well organized and well governed company, and a company which can stand the test for public listing at some point of time or the other. Therefore, a culture of governance is very important, which means promoting integrity and compliance in the organization. That would be one core aspect of the new leader. Second, culture of collaboration. An individual may be entering an entrepreneurial company singularly. Therefore, he would inherit a large organization which is already present and which is functioning in a particular manner. So, a culture of collaboration, ability to take the legacy team on board, that is extremely important. Then the third is culture of sustainability. Entrepreneurial firms grow with or without profits, and mostly without profits. If you really look around and see how the entrepreneurial firms have been growing, they have been growing in the market share but not necessarily in the profitability. So, a professional leader, when he or she enters an entrepreneurial firm, bringing in a culture of sustainability is extremely important. That is what Anant Narayan tried to accomplish when he entered Mahindra from McKinsey. He said that his goal is to be the first profitable fashion e-commerce entity in the country. So, that is the vision with which he came on board. So, culture of sustainability is very important, and balancing scalability of the business as well as the sustainability of the business, that becomes another important cultural factor. Then culture of openness. Many times these changes, particularly the leadership changes, are cloaked in secrecy, they are announced all of a sudden. So, the strategic significance of the transition, does it mean the promoters are exiting, or they are losing interest, or that they are seeing the end of the business model, or they are signaling that the entire organization has to be reshaped? There could be umpteen questions that arise when a leadership transition takes place. Therefore, a culture of openness on identifying the issues of concern and how these will be addressed, that will be very important. Equally important will be the culture of creativity, probably one of the most important aspects of cultural transformation. It is actually embodiment of the culture that gets further reinforced when a new leader comes, because the spark of entrepreneurship is verily the spark of innovation. So, how do you retain the entrepreneurial innovative spirit, the creative spirit within the organization? So, you should continue to promote the culture of creativity in the organization. Then the culture of connectivity, willingness to be respectful towards the founder's accomplishment thus far. So, which is slightly different from taking the organizational team on board. This is specially tuned towards the founders, their contributions thus far, and how the new management could be in touch with the founders and benefit from their ability, and also convince them how they would take this company on a new growth path going forward. So, the cultural capabilities beside technical and business skills are extremely important for the CEO as he or she enters an entrepreneurial company. But that said, things won't be as easy when it happens in terms of a leadership transition. For the new CEO, coping with the family and founder will have certain significant behavioral issues. We discussed earlier that there are two types of founders, family founders and non-family founders. Non-family founders tend to be very aggressive, not necessarily in terms of trying to do things fast, but more importantly trying to do things that the lean resources would permit. So, that is the aggression which a non-family founder tries to exhibit. On the other hand, family founder is likely to be more involved in cash management, would be respectful of remaining cash surplus as much as possible, and therefore, in spite of having group strengths that could promote very aggressive enterprise building, the family founder would tend to be a little more cautious and conservative. So, when these are the kinds of behavioral attributes of a non-family founder or a family founder, if such a family founder or a non-family founder continues in an executive position or in an influential board position, that presence is likely to constrain the new CEO either way, either in terms of the cash conservatism or cash aggression, in terms of the growth aggression or in terms of the growth moderation. So, having the family founder in a continuing executive position is a challenge. So, we have a 4-point formula to deal with that. One, obviously CEO should have all the abilities which we have discussed earlier to be able to bring his persona to the organization. Second, he should recognize what are the aspirations of the founders that are unreasonable and that are reasonable. Correspondingly, what are the reasonable and unreasonable opportunities, and what are the reasonable and unreasonable resources that are required. So, ability to map the opportunities, constraints, resource requirements and deliverables, and providing a feasible solution for the startup, that is the CEO's ability. So, depending upon the influence or the continuing influence of the family founder or non-family founder, the new CEO must develop his own grid of opportunities and challenges, resource requirements and execution capabilities, and provide a feasible set of solutions for the family or the founder. And that is again easier said than done, because there are multiple influences on founder and CEO dynamics. There are bound to be variations between how a professional CEO functions and a founder CEO works. And these are essentially three in terms of triggers. One, aspirations. Aspirations vary. As I said, a professional CEO would like to have profitability and sustainability as soon as possible, whereas the founder would continue to pursue growth. Second, the styles. Founder is so internally obsessed with the contributions he or she has made, his or her ability to understand what else could be done by others tends to be somewhat skewed. So, styles could be different and personalities themselves could be different. Having brought a company all by oneself from this single smallest existence to what it is today, the personalities reflect that level of conviction, that level of pride and that level of in some cases ego. So, the aspirations, the styles, the personalities, they vary between a professional CEO and a founder CEO. That is one part of this story. The other part is that the new CEO has got primarily three stakeholders he or she has to cater to. One, the investors, who are the lifeline for an entrepreneurial company. Two, the founders, who are likely to be the opportunity makers as also the constraint makers, and the team, which is the essential vehicle to take on the task further to new realms of growth. So, these are the multiple influences that we have in terms of founder and CEO dynamics. So, handling all of this is extremely important for the new CEO. So, how does one look at this problem? There are three aspects to it. One, we have multiple co-founders, as we have discovered in most companies. Two, co-founders have certain responsibility, and the new CEO in the third aspect has got certain responsibilities. So, the fact of the matter is invisible inter se power dynamics. Whether one likes it or not, they happen, and some of them tend to be passive, but they could wield influence immensely. It could be a strategic shift that could be occurring, and on that everybody else other than the CEO may have an opinion, and by having an opinion which is unexpressed and which is passive, that could lead to significant impedance in the organization. That is the issue of multiple co-founders. Given that this is the situation, what are the co-founders' responsibilities set? One, discourage surreptitious or open use of extra constitutional power, because we have enjoyed power until now in a formal structured way. We cannot allow our power to be utilized by anybody else in a surreptitious and non-helpful manner. And our responsibility as co-founders should be to align the new CEO and ourselves onto a common agenda. The new CEO has a responsibility. Whatever be the dynamics, once the CEO is in, it is the CEO's responsibility to ensure that he or she takes the total ownership what the entity represents, both in terms of the physical parameters or in terms of the cultural parameters. He owns it all, including the founders. So, how do I mold all of these things in my favor would be the CEO's requirement. Bringing together the entrepreneur, the family and the CEO himself or herself is a major responsibility, and it is the CEO's responsibility to ensure that the power dynamics would not distort or thwart the efforts that are to be made by the CEO in transforming the company. So, this is the issue. Now, that is again easier said than done. So, how does one counter the informal channels and how does one counter potentially continuing micromanagement of the company. So, the CEO toolkit for handling this is very simple. There are three aspects to it. One, structured strategic planning and budgeting. As long as the vision is well articulated, the strategy is cleverly and clearly formulated, and goals are properly budgeted and stage gated, the ability to have eddies around these plans would be very limited. So, that is the first point. Second, there should be visible performance management systems. There should be clear milestones, there should be clear deliverables, and there should be clear measurement mechanisms. And the third one, the discussion on all of these aspects, whether it is the strategic planning and execution or the performance management and rewarding, that should be done through open communication channels and through discussion forums. When this happens through this CEO toolkit, the CEO would be able to counter informal channels, would be able to counter micromanagement effectively. So, to repeat, good strategic planning and budgeting, visible performance management system, and open communication and discussion channels go a long way in handling the issues of internal dynamics that may have existed or that would erupt when a leadership transition takes place. So, there are I would put two types of challenges. One type of challenge is the challenge of keeping up the growth momentum. So, how does the new CEO keep up the growth momentum? First, business development and commercialization. By and large, by the time a new CEO comes, the essence of product development would have been done, the technology would have been improved, tested, validated, and the product would be ready for pre-commercialization. The CEO is coming in essentially to add the depth of functional management, the breadth of strategic diffusion which he has or she has to the company. So, business development and commercialization is an extremely important aspect of new CEO's tenure. And how does the CEO do? By getting new applications for the products, by getting new customers to the product. And secondly, strategic planning and operations management. That's an area where the new leader would make a significant impact. What is done as back of envelope calculations, as knee-jerk responses to market developments, can be handled through appropriate strategic planning and operations management. So, having a very defined glide path for growth, ensuring that there is operational excellence in whatever that is adopted, the new leader can definitely ensure that the growth momentum is maintained and the quality of growth is improved further. And the third one, project execution and scale up. Again, as I said, by the time the new leader comes, the essence of the product platform would have been proven, but what would not be still proven is the supply chain. What would not be still established is the in-house versus outsourced decision. What would not still be done is the appropriate costing level. So, there are a number of issues which are related to manufacturing, make or buy, and then integration of different technologies. Again, these are the challenges and opportunities for the new CEO. But from the point of organizational resilience, the challenges for the CEO would also be threefold. One, how do I reinforce the legacy? How do I consolidate on the past accomplishments of the organization thus far? And how do I bring in the new process efficiencies without being disrespectful of the legacy? Second, how do I define a new vision? New vision does not mean that the existing vision should be completely changed. There should be continuity, but at the same time, it should take the company for another 10 years, 15 years, 20 years seamlessly. So, what is the new growth blueprint that I would be able to bring, and how do I raise resources for that? And finally, how do I inspire the team? Any leadership transition leads to some level of angst at in certain quarters. It also could lead to certain concern in other quarters. So, how do I inspire the team? The only way you can inspire an entrepreneurial team, irrespective of the leadership change, is to continue to stress on creativity and innovation, continue to build on passion and commitment that have been the hallmarks of the entrepreneurial organization thus far. So, there are three business operational opportunities and pathways for the CEO. Similarly, there are three organizational opportunities and challenges for the CEO. But to be able to do that, like every other CEO in every other company, the CEO in an entrepreneurial mainstream company would also have paradoxes to solve. While there is every reason for bringing in a CEO into a family firm, that reason principally being to do things differently, when it comes to systemic changes, the entrepreneur or the family would more likely be diffident or concerned rather than support the changes, and that could be due to either losing the business momentum or the business stability, as the case may be. But to be able to do that successfully, the CEO must excel in paradox management, and typically successful CEOs excel in paradox management in any environment, whether they are in established companies or in entrepreneurial companies. Successful CEOs excel in paradox management. So there could be typically 4 types of paradoxes one encounters. The first one is losing out certain people, bringing in certain other people, which means creating new knowledge positions and bringing in new talent for that, even while right sizing the organization. That is the first paradox. How do I recreate, restructure jobs? How do I rejuvenate talent? How do I ensure that my talent base is at the leading edge of technology and leading edge of business process? That is the first paradox to handle. Second, how do I trim my current costs so that I can become profitable, yet make the kinds of investments that are required to move forward in future? So how do I marry the long-term investment propensity of the entrepreneurial firm with the short-term cost compression requirements to stay profitable? That is the second paradox. The third one is, while I may have created certain products, if the products are not creating the kind of markets that they are expected to create, how do I phase out the products and how do I bring in the new products? And what does it mean in terms of investment requirements? And finally, to bring in all these things, how do I restructure my R&D and how do I restructure my marketing so that there could be better commercialization, better scale up and better sustainability? So these are the 4 challenges. You can start in any of the quadrant, but eventually the result could be the same. How do I restructure my R&D and manufacturing for better commercialization, scale up and sustainability? How do I create and staff my new knowledge positions? How do I optimize costs both in the short term and in the long term? And how do I do product renewal for the company? And if a CEO is able to manage these paradoxes successfully, he would also be managing the company equally successfully. So what is the winning triad for a professional CEO? Again, it is common across the board, whether he is in a small company or a large company, whether she is in a entrepreneurial company or established company. 3 factors determine whether the CEO is likely to be successful. 1, personal gravitas. Every CEO should be able to bring certain personal gravitas to the position. That gravitas comes out of 3 factors. 1, it is a concomitant of proven accomplishments. Such personal gravitas provides adequate armor against pushback by vested interests, and it also enables the CEO undertake new initiatives. If you have personal stature, if you have got personal strength, you will be able to incubate new initiatives much more successfully than you would be able to do if you are not having that kind of personal gravitas. Second, operational excellence. While personal gravitas is important, ability to run the operations efficiently, productively and effectively, that's very important. So for that, you need operational excellence toolkit, which will ensure superior revenue, superior profit performance. It will support cash generation for new initiatives, and it also makes the new CEO performance go beyond the question. Nobody can question the performance of the CEO, irrespective of any other dynamic that could exist in the company, as long as operational excellence is achieved to a top-notch level. Then the strategic intuition. One thing which differentiates a leader from others is the ability to intuitively do a few things, not merely instinctively but also intuitively, not merely by expertise and not merely by data, but by exercising the intuition that is very specific to the leadership. So that makes the CEO a leader, even though he has entered a new context, even though he or she has entered a new firm. That is number 1. Number 2, the intuitive ability to take the correct decisions and follow it through. That makes the leader an inspiring leader. And fourth, a strategically well guided organization goes ahead of the pack and is able to retain competitive advantage in a much more significant manner than any other company. So, these are the three factors which will help a leader become effective CEO: operational excellence, strategic intuition, and personal gravitas, again in whichever order you would like to take. Now, we spoke about change with continuity, but what are the dilemmas involved in change with continuity? Because there is a very nice phrase which says, no, everybody would like to have change, everybody would also like to have continuity. People would like to stay in their zones of comfort while also recognizing that unless they move out of the zones of comfort, they would not be able to make a mark in the competitive world. So, change with continuity is a nice buzzword, but what are the challenges and dilemmas of change with continuity? So, when you look at change, the biggest worry is whether we would lose the past momentum. The second biggest worry is that we would be upsetting the established dynamics. And the third is that any change would require a new way of doing things, new products, new manufacturing facilities. Therefore, there would be enhanced capital requirements. So, what does that mean for my business? And when you look at continuity, the worry is us, we will fail on the change management. After all, we brought a leader inside the company mainly to achieve change. But if we emphasize the continuity aspects of it too much, then you might fail on the change mandate. Second, if you are too much moribund in terms of the continuity paradigm, you may not recognize the kind of competition that is already occurring, and agile competition could be very well ahead of you and you may lose out. That is the second worry. And the third is that if you are too focused on both the things to an equal degree, you are likely to get stuck in the middle. You will neither be changing nor will you be the same as you were before. So, you would be structurally changing yourself, but strategically you may not be changing, or you may be strategically changing, but structurally you may remain as ossified as ever. So, how do I manage this change with continuity? That is the biggest dilemma. And the ability to manage this dichotomy is again one of the creative challenges and opportunities for the new CEO. Another important aspect is the normal distribution of effective performance. What is this concept? We all know about normal distribution. When you plot a whole series of data points, they tend to follow a normal distribution, and there will be a core which is about 70%. Most of the talent, let's say you take an admission process, you would see that if it is the desired average, the high performance average or high performance peak which you would like to have, you will find that there are a few candidates who are this side and who are candidates this side, and it will again have further trough and a further trough. So, you can call it 1 sigma limit, 2 sigma limit, 3 sigma limit, whatever it is. So, but to put it in a simpler way, there are basically three types of domains or areas where the leader should concentrate. One, the core area. Second is the adjunct area. And the third is the distractive area, which could also be disruptive area. Now, if you focus on core areas, you are bound to succeed. That is driving revenue with profitability, ensuring scale with sustainability. That should be 70% of your effort. Then there is also this adjunct area, where you may need to turn around for better cost and efficiency management. You need to make futuristic bets, which is value gaming. So, this is adjunct area. And you also need to look at destructive areas, disruptive areas, distractive areas, which could prevent you from effectively functioning in the core areas and the adjunct areas. That is, trying to disrupt the business without consolidating, trying to be too much rigid without being flexible, or being too flexible without being rigid. Therefore, when you want to take up a new business activity as a leader, you need to be very focused on what is your core area of performance, core metric of performance, what is your adjunct area, and what is likely to be the destructive or distractive area for your performance. Therefore, a focus on the outlying areas beyond the limits indicated could expose a CEO to the threat of weakened performance on the core. So, if you put in too much effort on adjunct areas, core areas are likely to get impacted, or if you put too much on the distractive areas, both core and adjunct could get affected. So, in terms of the normal distribution of effort and rewards, you should have that kind of distribution.